Welcome back to the Midnight Mirage School of Higher Learning and Higher Thought. You tune into another classic. What I want to do in this afternoon's tape is give a memorial dedication to all the melanated men and women of America, old and young, that have died throughout the centuries. Some of them may have died in the different wars that our people were involved in here, protecting the land, and even some of the people that may have died in the wars that were involved in the United States, but when a lot of brothers, enlisted in the army. So, for example, World War I, World War II, a lot of brothers went and lost their life in that. So this memorial is including them. Of course, the brothers that was fighting in the Civil War and all the other various wars that were here. The Mobilian Wars in Mobile, Alabama in the 1500s. All the various wars, your Massey Wars in the early 1700s that died. All the various wars. The people that died from the smallpox, the different viruses and diseases that were brought here from foreigners. We want to give a memorial to those people. We want to give a memorial to all the women throughout the centuries, the indigenous American women who were sexually abused, may have been raped and killed throughout the centuries of years, some of them known, some of them unknown, and the women that just experienced different sexual traumas throughout the, more than likely around this probably mid 1800s, early 1800s. So we want to memorialize those women that lost their life in that. We want to memorialize all the children throughout the hundreds of years, all the way up to this day. The Atlanta child murders, the children, the young men and women, the young so-called black girls and boys who were kidnapped, killed, sold off into sex trafficking. Maybe their organs were removed and sold. We want to give a memorial dedication to them. We want to give a memorial dedication also to the people who are behind the wall right now or were sentenced to a life, sentenced in prison and were, put on death row and already got their life has already expired. But let's say some of these people didn't commit the crime. You got these people that have lost their lives behind the wall and they'll never be free again. And maybe it was a crime they didn't commit. And even the ones that may have committed a crime, but it was in self-defense or some other nuanced detail to where it makes logical sense of why they did it. But nevertheless, they still lost their freedom and they'll never be free again like we are. They'll never have that luxury to sit here and listen to a tape or make a tape with the liberty that we have right now at this present moment. So we want to, give a dedication and memorial to them. We want to give a dedication and memorial to all the old so-called black businesses that were thriving once in segregation. But, through different riots, when towns were destroyed, different wars, different secret societies and international bankers that invested in their, businesses being destroyed, and the other plots and schemes that these people had to suffer, and they lost everything, So we want to give a dedication and memorial to them. And any other kind of so-called black person, out there that was a good image, they were a good person, but for some reason, their time was cut short, and either they lost their life or they behind the wall. So, we just wanted to be humble and give those people a gratitude, the fallen soldiers really, in this, constant battle and war, really that the people from our ethnic national group are in. To this day, we still dealing with, COINTELPRO agents being sent out to do mass shootings, these mind-controlled zombies being sent out to do these mass shootings. So, just wanted to give an introduction and a dedication to those people And ultimately, right now, this tape is for the peace of mind, I'll say, you know, for so-called black people that, you know, really are a good image. And sometimes when you see these, you know, poor behaviors from our people on the news, on social media, and it's embarrassing, you know, this tape is going to be to provide some peace for that. Because whenever you get knowledge and understanding, you can see historical trends. You can get some of the origin of, you know, the things that you're seeing now. This will give you what they call a peace of mind. So that's what this tape is going to do. It's going to give you a peace of mind, because what I want to do is we're going to look at the esoteric knowledge, the occult knowledge behind how our people were mentally and emotionally programmed through societal events, through marketing, corporate advertising, propaganda, promotions, through celebrity idols, false idols, and a variety of other means to basically mentally program them to behave a certain way. All right. So we're talking about, you know, a behavioral analysis, analyzing the behavior of so-called black people, of people that we have certain stereotypical behavior that's very counterproductive to our own success. A lot of the brothers, I'll give you an example. A lot of the brothers, they may procreate too early in their life. When you get a wife and child, if you love them at least, you want to have something to give them. You want to have a certain, you know, wealth of life experience to be able to bestow wisdom upon them. You need certain assets that you've already paid off. And you also need to be able to, you know, have a business environment that your wife can work in and she can make money within the family. So it's a lot of things you need set up before you know, introduce a wife and child into your life if you're going to love them the right way. But a lot of brothers, they procreate too early, you know, before they've done these important things. They'll procreate and bring a child into this world. And then, you know, include the woman in that responsibility. But really the leadership isn't right. They did it at the wrong time in their life. So how you got these brothers procreating too early, and then you got a lot of the women procreating too late. You got a lot of the women saying things like, you know, I want to get my degree first. I want to travel the world. I want to experience maybe having multiple boyfriends, and a variety of other counterproductive things that they do in their 20s primarily. And then they'll get, you know, somewhere in their 30s or 40s, and then all of a sudden they're ready to reproduce, where, not saying that their physical body can't reproduce, but biologically, let's just say that the product has been used, all right? And when it was in its pristine state, when it was at the best time for it to reproduce, it didn't. So you just got a lot of the men reproducing too early and the women reproducing too late. A little bit of that could be my opinion. So I don't want to come here and seem like I'm a dictator, but I just kind of was thinking about that the other day. So, you know, so going back to what we're saying, we're talking about these certain behavioral archetypes, how we have the Jezebel archetype in our community. You know, the woman that may be over-sexualized. Then you may have the, you know, so-called black, what they call the quote-unquote black buck in the community. The man that's over-sexualized and, you know, he's procreating in a mindless way with all these different women and not taking care of any of the responsibility. You have the archetype of, well, one of the recent ones that they was calling the quote unquote high value male, or the idea of this white collar corporate America, so-called black male who has gotten this education. And now he thinks he's at a certain level. And really what he is just a what they would call a bootlick. You know, he's part of some fraternity or some secret club, and he sees himself as better than the other so-called blacks. You got all these different archetypes. Of course, you got the quote unquote, what they say, the hood archetype. You know, the brothers in the streets who really didn't take their schoolwork serious. They get into a lot of criminal behavior, some from, you know, being low to moderate to severe. But nevertheless, they're not using their time in a productive manner. They're not working on any kind of business. They're not working on their intellectual faculties. So they're being counterproductive to the community and themselves. So just think about all these different archetypes in our community that we see in movies, you know, and Because some people get mad and say that, well, you know, that's a stereotype X, Y, and Z. Like when they'll say, for example, you know, like how the police may see a guy and he may have, let's say, a bandana of a certain color. Now, some brothers wear bandanas in the neighborhoods and they're not part of no gang. Like brothers just may use that just to wear as on some style type stuff. Like we've always been into stuff like that. But but because of certain stereotypes, the police will just put everybody under one umbrella and say, no, everybody that has a rag, it may be part of a gang. And the reason why a lot of the times he's correct, because that is the case, So in other words, where do all these stereotypes come from? How are our people programmed in such a way to where, although there are, tens of millions of us throughout the country, but no matter what town we're in, no matter what the population is, and really no matter even what the economic level is, you see these consistent archetypes. For example, today you see the archetype of the women. They on the Instagram, they got the same type of hair. They got the same type of hair with the little, how they'll have the hair done, and in the front they'll have the little baby hair with the slick baby hair in the front. Y'all know what I'm talking about. It's just different little things that I see that they all doing, these little archetype, same poses, So in other words, where do these archetypes come from? So we're gonna just look into the mystery of where that comes from, because the way that the magic is being used is through marketing, propaganda, media, entertainment, celebrity, idols, and what they call trends. Okay, so that is actually the medium that the wizard is using to perform the mind control on the subject, which in this scenario are so-called black people. And some of our people are under the mind control and some of our people are not. Those that are not under the mind control, they're in the true original image that we were intended to be in. But those that are under the mind control, they are more one of these archetypes, which is a false image. They're the zombie state. Those are the people of so-called black America that you get embarrassed and you feel, humiliated when you see them in public, let's say twerking in the restaurants, or, you may be somewhere at Chick-fil-A and they arguing with the people in front of you where they just had to wait, let's say 5 minutes to get their drink. So it's just these different things that we do where really in your mind, you feel embarrassed because you're seeing these archetypes. So the question you have to ask yourself is, all these archetypal characters, it's just like Marvel Comics. You know how in Marvel Comics, they'll have, the different characters. They got X-Men. They'll have, like in DC Comics, they got their different characters. They got Batman, the Riddler, the Joker, all these different characters, all these different archetypes. But who is the artist? Who thought of them? Who drew them up? All right. Who programmed them? Who brought them to life? Okay. So if you know that there was an artist for Batman, there was an artist for Superman, there was an artist for Lex Luthor, there has to be an artist for these archetypes in the so-called black community. There has to be a programmer for the behaving and the mental pattern that you see them do, the phrases. There has to be an author behind this, okay? So that's what we're looking at. So when I talk about the occult or the esoteric implication, I'm talking about these authors of confusion, these authors of mind control, these chaos magicians of mind control that are using an ancient Jewish Kabbalistic magic that goes back to the time of Babylon. It goes back to the time of ancient Iran, ancient Persia, where the Shemitic Israelites, when they were basically taken from Judah and they were taken into Babylon, and during that time period, they were living in modern day areas, what we call Iraq, Iran, that region, Turkey. All right. And after Babylon was destroyed, some of those people went back to Israel, but also a lot of them went into Greece. Some of them stayed in Iran, etc. And a lot of the different Chaldean astrology that the, different Shemitic and Hamitic people of that land were practicing, a lot of the Shemitic Israelites picked up these Kabbalistic understandings. a lot of this anthropomorphic ideology. So the concept of, man being his own God and God having anthropomorphic features, and then associating and infusing the astrology in with it. A lot of that is what they call the Kabbalah. Okay. So the Kabbalah is an anthropomorphic type of magic of man and a type of philosophy of man as well. And this Kabbalah, it has a political wing, it has an ideological wing, but it also has a scientific and a technological wing, okay? And it also has an entertainment propaganda wing too, all right? So what we're talking about is it's mind control, but it's mind control via the Kabbalah. So the chaos magicians, or these, executive directors, the people that are behind these corporations, a lot of these media advertisement corporations and companies, the marketing directors, etc. These people behind the scenes, don't be surprised if they know and understand the occult esoteric knowledge of the Kabbalah and the anthropomorphic sciences of ancient Babylon, because a lot of their science and technology, when they're creating these cyborgs, these artificial intelligence, these computers, this is the usage of the Kabbalah, all right? Also, when you think about Greek philosophical thought, when you think about people like Plato and all these different philosophers of ancient Greece, ancient Athenia, these different thinkers, a lot of that was also Kabbalistic thought, okay? Kabbalistic thought. So what we talking about ultimately in this tape is understanding what's called the Golem or the Goyim, all right? The mind-controlled servant, the mindless masses, the slaves of the Dajjal or the slaves of the false prophet, those who follow all the trends of society, those who follow the culture of celebrities, those who follow idols, those who blindly follow the government and corporate media / propaganda, those with no spiritual insight and no intuition. So those that just fall in line with whatever the celebrities say, whatever the new R&B artists put in the music, whatever they say, they fall in line with it and they do it. Whatever new acts that they see the porn stars doing in bed, they follow these things blindly without questioning them. All right. So these are the mindless masses we're talking about. And the Shemitic word that we would use in the ancient world is the Goyim or the Golem. All right. Now the term Goy was used in different ways, but right now I'm talking about the servant. All right. The servant. I can remember a time when I was watching, it was American Horror Story. And it was the season with the alien. And when the alien was basically working with the government and they were impregnating people. But long story short, it was an episode where it was showing these young people that the story was centered around. And it showed this couple, it was these two guys and they were a couple. And one of them was a so-called young Jewish man and the other one was a regular so-called Caucasian man. All right. And I remember that it was a scene where their friend that was a female, she was asking them, well, how do you guys sneak you all's relationship? Like, you all are always around each other. Like, what do your parents say? And then the Jewish guy, he said, well, I just tell them that he's my Goyim or my Goy. And he basically, does things like drive for me, turn on electricity on the Sabbath. And then they kind of joked about it and gave each other a kiss. So what the writers in American Horror Story are showing you through that small little dialogue is that in the Jewish community, or really Shemitic Israelite, ancient Muslim, Moorish, Sephardic, culture, what we would do is we were very, very strict about the morals and principles we were standing on and that we created at that time. And on the Sabbath day or the rest day, the people didn't do any work. It was more of a laid back day, okay? It was more of a laid back day. So just like I read yesterday when I told you about the Shemitic Israelites that were fishing on the day of the Sabbath, and they were coming up with these creative, clever, really rebellious ways to go against the Sabbath to still get the benefit and the residuals of have done work, but not really doing the work themselves. So them either casting the net the day before the Sabbath, and then the day of the Sabbath, the fish come, but they're not actually out there doing it. And then they're going to say after the Sabbath end, well, I wasn't out there fishing, but you now get the benefit of the fish. And the same way how in American Horror Story, the Jewish guy was hanging out with his, homosexual friend, and they had a relationship, but to hide it, he was telling his parents that this guy that's with me all the time really is just my goy to do certain work on the Sabbath when I can't do it. And then they say, oh, okay. So this is a practice that we would do. We would have servants with us, or some kind of creative thing we could use to get labor done on the Sabbath, and we could get the benefit from it, but not having done the work. And through the years and years and years of our people, of course, having the culture and being in the Sabbath, people got more arrogant, they got more, egotistical, and they came up with more and more and more creative ways to get out of doing work and have these different servants, these different technologies, these different systems to make them more resources to where they don't have to do as much work, and they start relying more and more and more on servants. That's why when you look at all the original so-called civilizations that were doing slavery and that were perpetuating in a massive way, these were melanated indigenous people. These were the Shemitic and Hamitic nations, the melanated original ones that was enslaving people and making Goy and Golems out of people. We were the ones doing that. So that happened to us in a small, window of history. I would say in the 1800s, when a lot of us were denationalized and forced into poor labor contracts. But as far as, on a global scale, no, we were the real slave owners. We were the Goy masters, the Goyim masters, the Golem masters. We were mentally programming people and forcing them into servitude. That's where the term Slovenian comes from. That's where the term serf or serfdom comes from. Today, where a person is a Slovenian and their nationality name is a Slav, where today we, one of the connotative ways we use it is a person in servitude or a so-called slave. We call a slave or a Slav is a Goy or a Golem. It's a servant. That's all it is. To do our bidding and for us to reap the benefits from its labor on the Sabbath day, when it's the day of rest, when we're not supposed to do nothing. But we start figuring and thinking, well, damn, if this were on the Sabbath day, if we could use the Goy and the Golem on the Sabbath day to do labor, then why not use them on all the other days of work, the other 6 days? So then we started implementing more and more and more magical, esoteric, occult systems that ultimately were designed to mind control, mentally program some Goy object, whether it was a human, and eventually we got into technology. And of course today that's where you get things like robotics from. Robotics is nothing new. That thought process goes back to the ancient Kabbalistic Shemitic masters that were into the Kabbalah. They've been thinking about this type of stuff and working and progressing to develop it. Another example of this would be on HBO Max. There's a show series called Raised by Wolves. It's called Raised by Wolves. You should check it out. But that series is exactly what I'm talking about. They showing you the Kabbalistic magic of these people that were called the atheists. And there was a war between the atheist and what they called the Mithraic. All right. And these ultimately were two technological, thought, tanks of society. And they went to war. It basically destroyed everything. But both sides had Goy or Golem or artificially programmed androids. And there was a scene where basically one of the androids found an ancient android. So it found an android that had been created thousands and thousands of years ago and restored it and brought it back to life. And it was more technologically advanced than the modern ones of the series. So that means that when the current day androids were finding the ancient androids were more advanced, they had more knowledge, And when the modern day android tried to speak to the ancient one, when they brought it back to life, guess what language the ancient one spoke? It spoke an ancient Chaldean Persian language, because they were calling it the Mithraic for Mithras. Going back to ancient Persia, all right? Those astrological magicians, they call the Eastern mystics. This is what I'm talking about. These Eastern mystics of the ancient world. These are the original Kabbalistic, Apple, Microsoft, Elon Musk, Tesla. They are the original ones of that. All right. So I just wanted to kind of go into that real quick. And understand that our people today are serving as the Golem or the Goy for global corporate / the bank elite. And they're foreign. They're not indigenous Americans. You got a lot of Aboriginal American people that are, selling folks out. But really, the poor behavior we're doing and the kind of productive culture that we have is benefiting these foreigners. It's making their pockets fat. For example, how you have like the Arab gas station. Why are these foreigners in our community with the gas stations, with the hair salons, with the Chinese food places? You mean to tell me that indigenous American people can't make Chinese food? We probably can make different flavors and all that better than them. Because the original ancient Mandarin, the original ancient Chinese, a lot of them got their culture from the ancient Yucatan, ancient Maya people over here. So I guarantee that culture and that food and the cuisine that we call Chinese food, that's probably something that came from over here in ancient Mexico and ancient California. Them people didn't create that shit. So why can't we just create our own versions of all this stuff? Since we the original thought fathers and mothers of it anyway. Because we're under the program and the mind control of the Goyim and the Golem. All right. So if you hear me use that term Goy, that's singular. If you hear me use the term Goyim, that's plural. And if you hear me use the term Golem, it's the same thing. So the Goy, the Golem, it's the same thing. All right. So don't get confused. Them two words are the same thing. Before we go into our reading, just understand that the Golem, man, it's a trained, docile animal. No different than a cattle, a sheep, a goat. All it does is eat, sleep, reproduce, and defecate. That's it. All right. And that's basically they got the state that our people are in. Like when they say, I'm just concerned with getting the bag and all that. Getting the bag is basically just getting something that you can consume. When you go and get the bag, you have a lot of resources. When you get these resources, transform into what we call food and luxuries ultimately that your body absorbs. And at the end of all that, you release it. So that culture of just getting the bag, that's a cattle culture. That's just something you just want to consume. You're a consumer. You really just want to get all this money just to consume. Y'all not trying to finance nothing. It's not like y'all getting all the bag to become financiers and bankers. You just become a consumer. So, So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to read a good article I have. It's called The Golem of Prague and the Golem of Rehoboth. All right. By Gershom Scholem. All right. Gershom Scholem. I'm going to read this article so you can get a historical context of what the Golem or the Goy or the Golem or the Goyim is. And then just correlate that with everything we've been talking about. So it's kind of long. We'll go through this and see everything we're going to read. It says, when a year ago, Gershom Scholem, the foremost authority of our day on Jewish mysticism, heard that the Weizmann Institute at Rehoboth in Israel had completed the building of a new computer. He told Dr. Chaim Perkeris, who, quote, fathered the computer, that in his opinion, the most appropriate name for it would be Golem. Number 1, Golem Aleph. Dr. Perkeris agreed to call it that, but only on condition that Professor Scholem would dedicate the computer and explain why it should be so named. What follows are Professor Scholem's dedicatory remarks, which were delivered at the Weizmann Institute on June 17th, 1965. So what we're going to read right here is basically Mr. Gershom Scholem's dedicatory statement to the creation of Dr. Perkis's computer that they're going to call the Golem. Now, remember what I told you, the Golem or the Goyim or the Goy, it's a servant. So artificial technology, remember, it serves the creator of it. All right. That's why humans create artificial technology, for it to be a servant. Who did I tell you were the original people to think of that? All right. Those were the ancient people. Once upon a time, there was a rabbi in Prague. His name was Rabbi Yehuda Lowell ben Bezalel, and he is known in Jewish tradition as the Maharil of Prague. A famous scholar and mystic, he is credited by Jewish popular tradition with the creation of a golem, a creature produced by the magical power of man and taking on the human shape. Now, before I go forward, in our situation, when we're talking about how our people are, we're talking about a creature produced by the magical power of man's propaganda, media, etc. All right, so keep that in mind. Rabbi Lowell's robot was made of clay and giving a sort of life by being infused with the concentrated power of the rabbi's mind. Now we're going into this Kabbalistic occult, science, and this is what these people are into. This great human power is, however, nothing but a reflection of God's own creative power. And therefore, after having gone through all the necessary procedures in building his golem, the rabbi finally put a slip of paper into his mouth with the mystic and ineffable name of God written on it. So long as this seal remained in his mouth, the golem was alive, if you can call such a state alive. For the golem could work and do the bidding of its master and perform all kinds of chores for him, helping him and the Jews of Prague in many ways. But the poor creature could not speak, he could not respond to orders, and he could sort them out, but no more than that. So let's reread this last part, because that's the state that you see, so-called black people in. Because remember, the term so-called black is not a real ethnic national term. So that term black denotes the golem or the jasad as well. That's another Islamic Moorish term, the jasad, Jasad. It's a mere body, but no spirit, no divine intelligence within it. And that's basically the state that you see our people in with a lot of the stuff that they do. So let's reread this. It says, for the golem could work and do the bidding of its master and perform all kind of chores on him, helping him and the Jews of Prague in many ways. But the poor creature could not speak, could not respond to orders, but he could sort them out. So that's the state that we're in. We can't really speak up for ourselves. We don't even have the real history and understanding of how we got in this position, ultimately. And we can't speak up for ourselves really to each other. Because I'm not talking about speaking up to no government, Caucasian people, no other foreigner. I'm talking about speaking up to other so-called blacks, within these little small communal areas that we could control at least. But we ain't doing it, because it's the state of the golem. The golem only can do the bidding of its master, which is serve the Democratic Party, which is serve the government, okay? And the Republican Party, for all that matter, all right? It's Kabbalistic masters on both sides. So I'm not choosing neither one of them. I'm an American, okay? So that's difference. I'm an American. United States citizens, that whole Republican and Democrat, that's involving something else. All right. So let's go. Let's see. We're going to read this part. Now we're going to go down a little bit. Let's see. In another version of the same legend, which is recounted of a great rabbi in 16th century Poland, the rabbi is successful in stopping the golem, but the head of clay falls upon and kills him. However, the most famous version in Jewish lore of the idea of the golem as a human creature on a subhuman plane is the one involving Rabbi Lowell. It is only appropriate to mention that Rabbi Lowell was not only the spiritual but also the actual ancestor of the great mathematician Theodore von Karman, who I recall was extremely proud of this ancestor of his, in whom he first saw genius of applied mathematics in his family. So let me repeat that, because didn't I tell you that the original Kabbalistic masters were the scientists, were the technocrats, were the mathematicians, were the engineers? Let's reread that. So why is he saying right here that this rabbi, all right, was not only a rabbi, but also a mathematician, because he was a Kabbalist. Okay? Yeah, we're going to reread it. It says, it is only appropriate to mention that Rabbi Lowell was not only the spiritual, but also the actual ancestor of the great mathematician Theodore von Karman, who I recall was extremely proud of this ancestor of his, in whom he saw the first genius of applied mathematics in his family. But we may safely say that Rabbi Lowell was also the spiritual ancestor of two other departed Jews. I mean John von Neumann and Norbert Weinel, who contributed more than anyone else to the magic that has produced the modern golem. It is the latest embodiment of this magic which we are privileged to dedicate today, the Golem of Rehoboth. And indeed, the Golem of Rehoboth can well compete with the Golem of Prague. Well, the Golem of Rehoboth and the Golem of Prague has nothing on the Golem of Black America, because this Golem is the ultimate Golem. No Golem has been, this Golem of today can rival with any of them. All right. Now, this idea of the Golem is deeply ingrained in the thinking of Jewish mystics of the Middle Ages known as Kabbalists. This is where it's getting deep. I want to give you at least an inkling of what lies behind the idea. It may be far removed from what modern electronic engineer and applied mathematicians have in mind when they concoct their own species of golem. And yet, all theological trappings notwithstanding, there is a straight line linking the two developments. As a matter of fact, the golem, a creature created by human intelligence and concentration, which is controlled by its creator and performs tasks set out by him, but which at the same time may have a dangerous tendency to outgrow that control and develop destructive potentials, is nothing but a replica of Adam, the first man himself. God could create man from a heap of clay and invest him with a spark of his divine life force and intelligence. This, in the last analysis, is the divine image in which man was created. That's very important. So the original image that we were created is that divinity, that divine intelligence, that life spark that was put within us. All right. Without this intelligence and the spontaneous creativity of the human mind, Adam would have been nothing but a golem, as indeed he is called in some of the old rabbinic stories interpreting this biblical account. When there was only the combination and culmination of natural and material forces, and before that all-important divine spark was breathed into Adam, Adam was nothing but a golem. Only when a tiny bit of God's creative power was passed on did he become man in the image of God. Is it then any wonder that man should try to do in his own small way what God did in the beginning? So let's reread this. So it says that the golem is a creature created by human intelligence and concentration, which is controlled by its creator and to perform tasks set out by him, but which at the same time may have a dangerous tendency to outgrow the control and develop destructive potentialities. So that's also what you see with a lot of our people. Because they're, occult overlords are starting to consolidate their resources, they're going to invest a little bit more into their Zionist state of Israel, because that's going to be their next leading power when they go deeper into this digital age of the Dajjal. So they're not paying as much attention to their, golem of the United States, because they know a lot of stuff over here as far as the corporation. And unfortunately, some of the stuff with the government it's about to take a hit from a lot of these world events that's naturally happening. So they're taking their, resources and, like LeBron said, I'm taking my talents to South Beach. They're taking theirs elsewhere. All right. So a lot of these mind control golem, their master has pulled away. So you're going to see more and more implosive, suicidal behavior. All right. So that lack of leadership that was already existing in the community, you're really going to see some more damaging effects of it. All right. So then it goes on to say that basically Adam was nothing but a golem until God blew the spark of his divine life force and intelligence within him. And it says that the divine image that man was created in, this is that perfect image. Without this intelligence and the spontaneous creativity of the human mind, Adam would have been nothing but a golem. And I'll reread it and say it like this. Without this intelligence and spontaneous creativity of the human mind, modern humans, modern so-called blacks, would be nothing but golems. Without this without this intelligence and the spontaneous creativity of the human mind, modern so-called people would be nothing but golems, goy, cattle. All right. Let's see. So we're going to reread this last part because it kind of goes a little bit more into the Kabbalah, and then we're going to wrap it up. There is, however, a hitch. Man can assemble the forces of nature identified by him as the basic forces of material creation and combine them into a semblance of the human pattern. This is what they're doing through technology. All right. So a lot of the magic that we're talking about today is expressed in what we call technology, modern technology, robotics, artificial intelligence, etc., computer sciences, quantum physics, etc. That's where these Kabbalistic magicians, that's where they work. That's the field that they're into. It says, there is, however, a hitch. Man can assemble the forces of nature identified by him as the basic forces of material creation and combine them into a semblance of the human pattern. But there is one thing he cannot give to his product, speech, which to the biblical mind is identical with the reason and intuition. So man can create technology, but the same way how the higher power brought us to life through that divine spark, through his spirit. See, we can't pass that spirit on to technology. So therefore, we can't create anything but golem, which is exactly what we do. Artificial technology, robots, etc. All right. So it'll never have the human spirit. So it can look a certain way. It can behave a certain way. It can mock the human being and imitate the human being in all ways, except anything that comes with the intuition, the divine intelligence, the spiritual insight, the human intelligence and creativity of the mind, the imagination, and anything that has to do with the internal spiritual aspect, the soul aspect, or the energetic aspect of the human, because it doesn't have that. All right. So the golem or the goy or the goyim, the internal energy of the human, either the higher power has something has happened to where they're not able to interface with it, and I'll just leave it at that. Let's continue. The Talmud tells a little story. Quote, Rabbi created a man and sent him to Rabbi Zerah. The rabbi spoke to him, but he did not answer. Whereupon the rabbi said, you must have been made by my colleagues of the academy. Return to your dust. End quote. In Aramaic, aka ancient Babylonian, ancient Chaldean, that region. In Aramaic, the language of the Talmud, the academic colleagues are denoted by the same word that is used for magicians. Let me reread that. What did I tell you that the Shemitic Israelites learned Kabbalistic magic from? The ancient astrologers of Chaldea. Okay, the Eastern mystics. If you ever hear that term in the Freemasonry and the Shriners, They talk about the Eastern mystics that taught the Knights Templars. They're talking about these Chaldean astrologers and Kabbalistic magicians of the ancient world. That's what they're talking about. The Babylonians. In Aramaic, the language of the Talmud, the academic colleagues are denoted by the same word that is used for magicians. Quite a nice ambiguity. Just as the human mind remains infinitely inferior to the all-encompassing divine intelligence of God, so does the Golem's intelligence lag behind the human. Let me read. Just as the human mind remains infinitely inferior to the all-encompassing divine intelligence of God, so does the Golem's intelligence lag behind the human. That is to say, it lacks the spontaneous which alone makes man what he is. So that spontaneous aspect of the human being, how we could create out of nowhere at a snap of a finger, the Golem lacks that. But still, even on a subhuman plane, there is in the Golem a representative or a representation of man's creative power. The universe, so the Kabbalist tells us, is built essentially on the prime elements of numbers and letters, because the letters of God's language reflected in human language are nothing but concentrations of his creative energy. Thus, by assembling those elements in all their possible combinations and permutations, the Kabbalist, who contemplates the mysteries of creation, radiates some of this elementary power into the Golem. The creation of a Golem is then, in some way, an affirmation of the productive and creative power of man. I will read that. The creation of a Golem is then in some way an affirmation of the productive and creative power of man. It repeats on, however, a small scale, the work of creation. All right. Let's see. And it continues because, of course, the science of the Golem the Kabbalistic science of the Golem is a very, 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 very deep, elaborate mystery, but I'll let you investigate more on your own. But we're going to end it right here. So that's what you're dealing with. Like these people that run these corporations that's paying these celebrities, providing them the advances, that are giving you these trends, the marketing, the advertisement, the promotions. The people that are behind that, not only are they businessmen and women, but they're also Kabbalistic magicians, chaos magicians. And they're using Kabbalistic science to mind control the people. All right. Stay tuned for the next one. I'm out.